responsible AI for responsible practice. I'm just going to go through a few housekeeping. It's going to be a very large attendance list. So I would just request that if you're not one of the panelists or one of the major speakers, maybe in this first instance, if you could all mute your devices and turn off your cameras. But when we encourage a lot of dialogue, so when you're asking a question, you could turn on your camera just for better interaction. And we just don't want the bandwidth to be too heavy on quite a lot of our users tuning in from different parts of the world. So can you move the slide so that we can see the okay, so this is our agenda for today. So and my humble self, I am Dr. Afolabi Dania, and I am welcoming you to this event. Again, can I also ask that, as you're joining, just try and make sure that you have like an identifiable name, so we're able to tell who's asking questions or who's interacting with us. Then next we have an opening remark from our head of school, Dr. Phil McGowan. And then we're going to go into an overview from the lead project leads, Kudirat and Abdullah Isaka. And then we're going to a panel discussion. And for the panel discussion, we have a very exciting array of speakers. And when that time comes, I'm going to read a brief citation of all our speakers. Then we're going to a Q&A session, so we're able to understand the directions of travel for AI and how it influences our practice as professionals in the built environment, specifically towards quantity surveying. And then we would now have a wrap up and to kind of, because it's an ongoing project, and as most of you will agree, AI is something that is revolutionizing the world in the past 2-3 years. I mean, even though it's existed for quite a while. So this is meant to be the start of an ongoing continuous program. So we need to think about what's going to happen next, what our challenges are for the immediate and long-term future. And so without further ado, I would like to welcome our head of school of the School of Applied Management, Dr. Philip McGowan, to give a brief 5 minutes opening remark. Over to you,
Thank
Phil.
you, Afolabi. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Phil McGowan. I'm, as Afolabi said, I'm head of the school, which is co-hosting the AI for QS project with Loughborough. And we're delighted to be involved in this from a university perspective, partly because obviously we want to be involved in research, but more importantly, we want to be learning from industry and sharing back to industry what we discover. So I think it's a really, really important project. I had the pleasure of attending the in-person for a period of time, and I think this series of webinars is a really good thing. Obviously, feedback that you give to the panel will be really useful as well. I'm glad to see this is being recorded both on this system and on others. So thank you to the panelists. Afolabi said he's going to do an introduction to them, so I will leave that to him. But a very big thank you to the panelists for taking time out of your very busy schedules. From what I can gather, we're the panelists from all over the world, and that's a really important piece as well, to bring this multi-faceted, multi-directional view to come together and to bring information, to share information, and to create new knowledge as we go. AI itself is really important. It's got a position and a place to play in just about every industry, but how it plays it and what it does and how we use it and what is ethical, what is reasonable, what is secure, are questions that are still frankly needing to be answered. And so I think it's really important that this forum considers those, particularly as the RICS has produced its responsible AI professional standard, which comes out into effect next March. So these discussions and this debate will help inform everyone involved, and hopefully also, with the support of the RICS, have the ability to feed into further versions of that standard, because I'm sure a standard that comes out in March with AI is going to be reviewed probably 6, 12, 18 months later. This isn't ongoing, it's a journey, not a destination. It's really interesting that AI brings a different perspective to sustainability, which is something very important to the University of Westminster. Everything we do in our built environment teaching and research is all about how we produce a sustainable, healthy and supportive built environment in which we and frankly all the inhabitants of the earth get to share space. My final remark really is about engagement today. If we could ask everybody that's not presenting to be muted, but to put questions in the chat, be called in by the panel, and then enjoy the debate. Please do engage with the debate and in the elements. And so it'd be good to have a lively chat running as well as the actual debate with on camera and with speakers. So without further ado, I'll hand back to Afolabi. I'm sure there's going to be a brilliant discussion and I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you very much, Philip, for that kind warm introduction. So we're going to move on to the next next item on the agenda. Could you move the slide, please? Yeah, so I'm going to invite the project team, the project lead, to give us an introduction onto the project so that for those of us who are joining us, this is the second major event we're having. For those of us who are joining this event for the first time, Dr. Sakai is going to give an introduction to what the project is about, what the objectives are, and what we've achieved so far. So over to you, Dr. Sakai.
So thank you very much, Falabi. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Abdullah Saka, and I'm welcoming you to this AI for Cares webinar section. So the AI for Cares project, it's a collaborative project between the University of Westminster and Loughborough University. The whole idea is we want to understand the impact of AI both in practice and in education. So we have array of teams that are involved in this particular project. Myself, I'm Dr. Kudirat from Loughborough University at the project lead. We also have our colleagues that are supporting us that we're working together on this particular project, Dr. Lanyika, Afolabi, Sicho, and Karen. And the whole idea around AI for QS project is it's in 4 phases. So we've done the first phase, which is we've conducted baseline research to actually understand AI use and the challenges in quantity surveyor, because the quantity surveyor are the cost data custodian. So it's very important for us to actually understand how can we use AI ethically and how can we use AI responsibly. So also the second phase of the research has to do with competency and education development, because one of the, as you're going to see later on when we start the discussion, one of the major bottleneck when it comes to adoption of AI is lack of skilled personnel, lack of knowledge and what have you. So we are focusing on how can we actually develop competency and education development, and with support from Innovate UK, we are developing some tailored intelligence system that construction professionals can actually log on to get certified to become AI competent professional. We don't want quantity surveyor, construction manager, we don't want them to become software developer, no. But we want them to know how to use AI responsibly and ethically to do their job as a QS or as a construction manager or as an architect or what have you. So this is the whole aim of the phase 2. And the phase 3, which we've been doing here and there, is more of knowledge exchange. We've been engaging with industry, we've been engaging with companies, with professional bodies here in the UK and also outside the UK. And lastly, we are developing a digital system, a digital hub, to basically house all the resources that we've been developing so far in this particular research, so that it's going to aid professionals, it's going to aid educators, and it's also going to aid students. So the last event that we had at the RICS headquarters in Westminster. There we were able to shape the direction of the project. There we discussed the competency, what are the competencies we need to focus on, what are the skill sets that we need to focus on in academia, how can we actually collaborate both academia and industry. We were able to do that in our last event. And today, why are we talking about responsible AI? So responsible AI is in QS practice, or even generally, it goes beyond the use of the latest tool you're trying to use, probably the latest development. And all the time we try to emphasize that ChatGPT is not the beginning of AI and it's not the end of AI, because some people, especially because AI came into public conscience probably in November 2022 with the release of ChatGPT. But when we're talking about AI on this project, we're not just only referring to ChatGPT, or we are referring to large language model. We are talking about the whole generative AI. We are talking about deep learning. We are talking about machine learning. We are talking about all the different systems that are actually available out there that you can categorize them under AI. So responsible AI, we need to talk about safety, as our panelists are going to be doing today. We need to talk about transparency. We need to talk about fairness. We need to talk about accountability and contestability. AI is developing, the pace of development is moving very fast. So as professionals, as researchers, we need to be at the forefront of this ongoing discussion to ensure that the profession we were able to adopt AI ethically and responsibly. And one of the major reasons why this conversation is well timed is because just I think probably 3 or 4 days ago, September 9, the RICS released the responsible use of AI in surveying practice, which is going to you're going to see some of some part of this in the panel discussion, and also the AI Construction 2025 report by RICS. You're going to have the link on the chats in the chat box now. They release the report on AI in construction, where they mentioned that 45% of the respondents, about 2,200 respondents, they reported no use of AI. And about 70% of stakeholders, including project manager, quantity surveyor, they have positive outlook about AI. They are really interested in using AI. So that means there is a gap between people that really want to use AI and people that are actually using AI. As some of the headlines around this report shows, the optimism is high, but the usage is very low. And one thing we've also noticed is there is this growing AI divide between the large firms and the SMEs, between the people that are probably AI compliant and the people that are AI complaints, people that are not really familiar with AI skill sets and what have you. And these are some of the things that we'll be talking about today. And with that, I think I will hand over to Afolabi to go to the next stage of the discussion for today.
Okay, thank you very much, Abdullahi, for that introduction into the project. So artificial intelligence, like he's mentioned, is not necessarily new. It has its origins way back with questions asked about if machines can think. But today we wonder, is it a shortcut to professionalism? Does it advance your skills? Does it help sharpen things? Does it make things faster? So to discuss all of these things, we understand that the use of AI could have issues of ethics. For example, in academia, sometimes there's questions around the originality of work produced by academics. So for these reasons, we wonder if, what does responsible AI look like? And that's what this panel today has been convened to discuss. So today we have quite some influential panelists to discuss this, and I'm going to introduce them, starting with Anil Sawhney, Dr. Anil Sawhney, and welcome to today's event. Dr. Anil is the head of sustainability at the RICS and also the chair of the ICMS Standard Setting Committee. And he's a global leader in sustainability and construction innovation, oversees quite a lot of portfolio of initiatives that position RICS at the forefront of shaping the built environment. And it's really important that, as AI is transforming practice, we have him here today to talk about AI and its responsible use. He's an academic. He's widely published. He has published 2 influential books, Construction 4.0, Innovative Platform for the Built Environment, and the Handbook of Construction Safety, Health, and Wellbeing in the Industry. So very welcome to you, Dr. Anil. And another panelist we have is Noha Salib, Dr. Noha Salib, another panelist. And we're happy to have you on the team. Dr. Noha is as an associate professor of creative technologies in construction at Middlesex University. She's a recognized leader in digital transformation, BIM, AI, emphasis on AI, digital twins, sustainable construction technologies, and has over 100 research publications and international leadership project, international project leadership experience. She's the program lead for the BSc Information Modeling and Management and Integrated Digital Delivery at Middlesex University. So you're also welcome. And then we also have James Garner, and James Garner is the head of AI and data at Gleeds. And you're very welcome. He's a quantity surveyor and a fellow of the RICS, and with over 25 years experience at Gleeds. He's led pioneering work in digital transformation within the built environment and leads global initiatives at the intersection of construction, data analytics, and artificial intelligence. So you're also welcome. And last but not the least, we have Kevina Kakembo, and she's a registered quantity chartered surveyor, and has been recently shortlisted as the Construction Surveyor of the Year 2025. So well done for that. You're recognized and also has recognition with awards, including the Rising Star Awards for Property and Young Professional of the Year. Highly commended amongst quite a lot of other recognitions. So I'm sure you all agree with me that the panel is very well set up to discuss this topic that we have for you today. So I'm going to hand over to Dr. Kudirat Ayinla to lead the panel session.
Right.
Oh.
Are we in the afternoon? Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll be delighted to lead the panel discussion today, and I would like to welcome all our panelists on board, and I'm looking forward to the exciting discussion and debate that we would have today, and also the Q&A we'll be having after then. Right. So what a time to be holding this conversation, just days after RICS launched his AI professional standards, just 8 days ago on the 10th of September. So we would be surrounding this conversation around this standard and trying to unpack how this would shape the profession going forward. So we'll be looking at aspects of transparency, accountability, and fairness, and looking at how to actually practicalize this in the real world or in our professional practice. So I'm going to be starting with Anil, and I have some exciting questions to ask, given that you are part of RICS and possibly also have an influence in this standard that we would be looking at today. So I'll be starting with Anil, like I said. So we're now in the phase whereby AI is being celebrated for helping us to track carbon footprints, improve material efficiency, and also reduce waste. But what the new RIC standard is saying is we shouldn't only be looking at what AI is helping us to do in terms of sustainability. We also have to be questioning the AI system itself in terms of its environmental footprint. So I'll give an example of the data centers, how much energy are these data centers consuming, and also how much is the carbon footprint that we are consuming when it comes to training our large model natural language models and the likes. So I'm trying to understand how professionals can actually navigate this paradox. So we're now at a stage where RICS is asking us to also look at our AI system and make sure that we document their sustainability impact. So how do you think we can actually navigate this paradox in this age?
Excellent. Thank you so much. First of all, thanks to the project team for inviting me to represent RICS on this panel. I think it's very well timed, a very important and challenging topic. So kudos to both universities for taking this initiative. So perhaps we can step back, and there are two schools of thought when it comes to application of AI in any industry, but let's talk about the construction sector. Many people think that AI is like a traditional technology. We had building information modeling come to us, and we treat it as technology, process, practice, adopted it. So it's nothing new. Just keep on doing the way you adapt different technologies, just use that. The second school of thought is really that AI is different. AI needs to be looked at differently. I think very soon you will realize probably the school of thought, the second school of thought, which is that we got to look at AI differently, is going to emerge, in my view, because I think AI is not your traditional technology. It's impacting pretty much everyone. When it was BIM, only perhaps the BIM authoring team members, so a modeler, an architect, or somebody who was using BIM downstream was impacted. But with AI, pretty much everyone in the office is using it and is getting impacted. So I think very rightly you said that RICS on 10th September released our responsible use of AI standard. We also recently on the 16th released our first annual AI in construction report. The link is available in the chat. Please feel free to download, review, give us feedback and impact. So now moving on, I think you had several aspects to the question, but I'm going to move to first the energy or sustainability and AI nexus. So very crucial to understand the connection there. I remember that there were folks used to say that you can't build a computer without a building. I think the things have fast forwarded and changed. Today, everyone is saying, and it's quite well known, that no AI without energy. So just to throw some numbers, a recently published report by IEA, uh, a typical AI-focused data center uses about energy uses about 100 equivalent to 100,000 homes. So electricity used by 100,000 homes is typically what a traditional typical data center uses. But now we have larger, bigger hyperscalers which use 20 times that much energy. So it's really becoming very important to consider this connection between sustainability and AI. There's going to be $500 billion worth of investment in data centers, specifically focusing on AI in the next few years. If you look at a global scale, about 1.5% of the energy use comes from AI-focused data centers, and that's likely to double to 3% by 2030. So already we are seeing signs of this tension between sustainability and use of AI. 20% of the data center projects ongoing right now are at a risk of, and I just saw James had published an article just this morning on AI and its impact on infrastructure, or the impact of lack of infrastructure on our continued use of AI. So 20% of ongoing data center projects are at risk due to lack of infrastructure availability. So that tells you that this is not an easy challenge. It's an important one to consider. But then it will be half of the story if we sort of leave it at that. AI can help actually minimize, reduce, make our data centers efficient. And the role of the construction sector, especially firms like Leeds, who provide cost and carbon services, is extremely important. So you can use AI to optimize, obviously, energy use. You can use AI to reduce embodied carbon. Very recently in the US, I'm based out of DC, you have a data center that was built by Microsoft using mass timber. So it has biogenic carbon, obviously starts looking at those sustainability issues. RICS recently has collaborated with an entity called iMasons Climate Accord. iMasons is a global professional body, which is perhaps the only one originally started by Meta, Microsoft, Amazon, AWS, and the likes, the folks who are the developers of these data centers. So I think there's significant activity going on to understand this link between AI and sustainability, but there's a lot more that can be done. And I think our profession plays a very crucial role in making that a much enhanced, improved situation by not only provisioning the infrastructure, the energy, but making it much more efficient. So it's a pretty interesting cycle where QSs use AI to make AI data centers more efficient. I think I'll stop there. If I missed any aspect of the question, happy to address that.
Yeah, I'm just going to ask a follow-up question based on the new standard as well. So RICS is now requiring that QS firm or surveying firm need to have a documentation of the environmental impact of the AI system that they have chosen to go for. Do you have any takes or any guidance on what this would entail and what level of detail in terms of the documentation that is expected?
Absolutely. So I think, first of all, the key highlight of the RICS standard is that it's still human in the loop. In fact, human driving the use of AI. So that doesn't change. I think we still want to use AI as an augmentation tool to do our work better, be more productive, and perhaps look at blind spots that you would generally, as a human, not be able to look at or see due to just the amazing amount of data that you have to look at. So that's one aspect. Then, in terms of disclosures, I think broadly, if you widen the lens, you will see ISO 42001 as the AI management standard, which is being adopted by more and more AI software companies such as OpenAI and others, where they will have to disclose their environmental impact. So that data should be generally available, especially by March next year. We're hoping that these providers of AI tools would have their disclosure statements, which not only address the environmental impacts, but also social and other aspects of using AI, such as ethical use, explainability. I think we're going to go into that later. So I think primarily that disclosure on environmental impacts comes from the providers of AI tools.
Right. Thank you very much, Anil. Thank you. I think we can all acknowledge the role of global standard in trying to shape the way we all practice and the way we implement things like AI in our day-to-day practice. But we can also agree that standards are only effective if the next generation of professionals are ready to implement them or to actually, use them in their practice as well. So I'll move on to the educational aspect by bringing in Noha as an educator. In the RICS standard, I'm not sure if you've seen it, but the new standard requires that every professional using AI must have a basic understanding of the risks and also the bias and the errors that you can get in terms of the output from the AI system. And I think the standard also went on to require every surveying firm using AI to, organize annual training for their employees to make sure that they continue to be equipped with the right knowledge on some of the biases, some of the errors they can get from the system. But then I'm wondering, how do educators use this in terms of, student perspective? How do we equip students with the right knowledge of the biases that come with AI system, the risks of using the results, and also some of the errors that they need to be spotting and taking accountability for? So how do we bridge this gap? Oh, you're on mute.
I was muted. Sorry. Thank you. That's a perfect question. And the requirements in the document are absolutely crucial when it comes to education on how to use AI in different courses, whether they're undergraduate or postgraduate. And it's a scaffolding process. Whenever that is introduced in a course, there needs to first of all be an understanding on how to interpret the data that is coming out of AI. It's crucial to spot where things might not align, while go to the references that are being provided, see whether they actually exist or not, whether the AI is interpreting it as it's intended in those original sources that are out there. So first of all, there needs to be this layer of making the students or the people who are training in industry or at universities or so on understand how they can interpret that, because without it, they cannot do any decision making. The next step is to put an ethical layer into it as well. So how does that align with human-centric needs, human-centric design, and then go on to how that aligns with different sustainability aspects. And when we talk about sustainability, it's not just environmental sustainability, it's also social, biodiversity, governance, inclusivity. Is there an aspect of that? And that helps us identify the biases, because if there isn't, for example, inclusivity in the way that the data is being presented, then there could be bias in the way that the AI is being produced. So this is the next layer in the scaffolding to help the students identify through examples how to see that. But then there is also another layer that comes after that, and that is related to the cybersecurity side of things. So they must be taught when to include what type of data that is not maybe sensitive to the companies that they're working in. If they are professionals, it is not sensitive to their personal information, how to redact certain information without removing the essence of what they're looking for. So that's, again, is extremely important. And by using examples like that, the students or in the courses will be able to understand how to include these aspects of ethical usage of AI within the courses. Of course, there are other things that can be done later on, like understanding how to include that in change management when it comes to training in companies, on a wider strategic level. But yeah, I mean, in principle, these would be the layers that one would have to go through in terms of academic training.
Yeah, thank you very much, Noah. I would like to follow up that conversation with another question, because we're currently in the age whereby we're encouraging professionals, students alike, to use AI to harness the strength of AI. But again, we might be running the risk of a situation whereby we are over-relying on the use of AI. And I'm sure we do want to ensure that we use AI to support learning, but we do not let it erode our core skills as surveyors or maybe as construction managers in general. So how do we balance this need? How do we continue to use AI, but make sure that we can retain the core skills that are needed for students to graduate and add value, later on in the profession?
Is that question for me to answer?
Yes, Noah, yes.
Oh, okay.
We're still on the
Yeah,
educator part.
yeah, happy to answer that. So one of the things that we do transparently with the students right at the beginning is not to ignore that they will be using AI, but definitely to make them understand what to use it for. So there are things which are preferable and things which are not. So the preferable is to, for example, help use it as a very quick tool to search for certain aspects instead of us, as a human searching for different things. The AI can be very, very quick in identifying different sources from different areas as well, like logbooks, projects, things which we might not have access to. So search is great. Analyzing the data, comparing the data is also great. But we also teach the students that they have to put in critical analysis of that data. So after they receive all of the data analysis, they validate that it makes sense, the sources are correct and everything. We must see the critical analysis side to what they're doing. Otherwise, we consider it as plagiarism, and we are very, very clear on identifying it to them. It is not a tutorial that we are receiving from them. It is what they perceive or synthesize from the data that is important to us. So that is, like just a summary of how we train the students on using AI. For example, if they're creating designs, if they're creating algorithms and things like that, they have to show us what parts were AI and what parts were their addition, and maybe if there are errors that they or not errors, but things in the understanding that they have changed or tweaked based on their own perception as well.
Yeah, I think that's gives the foundation for declaration and sort of like transparency, which is one of the things that we're looking at when it comes to the ethical use of AI. Thank you very much, Noah, for that. So I'd like to move on to the practice. So we've looked at the education aspect and also the sustainability aspect of AI application. I'd move on to James, and I'd like to draw on your role from GLEADS and also from working with RICS on this. I do also acknowledge your passion for upskilling, and which is what leads me to the next question on this.
Okay.
So Jack, I think you haven't seen the references or the description.
Well, I think somebody probably needs to go on mute, trying to figure out the. Right. So James, back to you. Sorry.
Yeah, what's the question?
Yeah, so back to you. So what competencies do you believe are the most critical for QS professionals to develop in order to confidently and responsibly use AI? So we have a lot of young professionals currently plugged into the meeting. So what sort of competency are critical to their application of AI responsibly and also confidently?
Yeah, really good question. I think it's quite overwhelming for people entering the industry in some ways, because not only do you have to learn all the basics, which you still have to do, it's still really important to understand what we do as chartered surveyors, but you also need to now learn around how to synthesize your AI literacy into that. So there's quite a lot to do, but they're not mutually exclusive. I think they can work together. So there's four kind of main things I would advise people to do. So the first thing I would say to everyone is, in terms of AI literacy as a skill, it's something that's not going anywhere. We're at the very beginning of a transformation. I know it feels like a lot's changed in a very small period of time with AI, but it's only been, in terms of ChatGPT and generative AI, really since 2022. So we've got a long way to run. So what I would advise is take responsibility for your own AI literacy. Now, if you're lucky enough to work for a company that invests in AI literacy, great. Or if you're working on a course or with Westminster or Loughborough, I'm sure they really can see they already invest in this kind of thing. But not everyone has the luxury of that. So if your company or your institution or your whatever it is isn't investing, take responsibility for yourself on your AI literacy. I would also advise around critical thinking. So this is a big part of the RICS standards. I was lucky enough to be on the drafting committee for it. And when I tell you, it wasn't an easy thing to write, because as someone mentioned earlier, it's an ever-moving target. And I'm sure you're right that there's going to be plenty of amendments to it as time goes on. But I think what's important is we started the conversation. We've got something out there that we can then build on. But the main crux of it, I mean, it's a fantastic document in a lot of ways, but it comes down to a relatively simple concept, which is, again, it's about responsibility. As a chartered surveyor, you still take responsibility for the output. And the best way I can describe this is a fantastic thing I heard from a report that was done by, I think it was the London Property Agency, where they talked about this concept of bookending, which was all around, you know, human at the beginning, and you can treat the human in the loop as bookends. Human at the beginning, you taking responsibility for what you're asking the AI to do, because rubbish in, rubbish out, that still holds true now as much as it ever has done. Use the AI to do the grunt work, use the AI to do the bits that, you know, doesn't really add any value. It just gets you to an answer that then you can use to provide value. And then crucially, and this is the bit that I think the RICS standard addresses, is human at the end taking responsibility for that output. And that's where the critical thinking comes in terms of people learning at the moment. You have to, and no, you said it perfectly. You know, you've got to show that you understood these concepts, because anyone can get an output from an AI and pass it off. But if you don't understand what you're passing off, then when you get questioned by a client or a developer or whoever, you're not going to be able to answer it. You've got to take responsibility for it. And saying, oh, well, the AI did it, the AI made the mistake, is not a defensible position, in my opinion. So what I'd say to everyone is, you know, people being educated, whether you're still at university or whether you're in the workplace and you're working towards your chartership, is use it as an incredible thought partner. That's the best way. Stop thinking of it almost as a tech thing. I mean, it is tech, but it almost feels like human, doesn't it, to use? So use it like that. Use it as if it's an incredible thought partner that can help you, and it can help you understand, and be critical about it. But more importantly than all of that is, you know, take responsibility for yourself. We are in incredible times. Technology is moving incredibly quickly, and I think the reality is, there's a lot of talk about it. Nobody really knows where this is all going to end up, and there's lots of opinions about things like AGI and ASI. Nobody really knows. And what one thing is for certain is there will be change along the way. So if you're just entering the workplace, what is definitely going to happen is you're going to have to reskill a number of times in your career. That almost goes without saying. So this is a great opportunity for you to start building those kind of disciplines within yourself now to say, right, okay, I know I'm going to be a surveyor, but I also need to understand I understand how to synthesize these new technologies as they come.
Yeah, thank you very much, James. And just to add to that, the standard is very clear. So it's requiring that professionals must use judgment and skepticism when using AI, and they must also document this in writing. And to follow up on that, I'd like to have your opinion on the new requirement where the standard is asking for AI risk registers to be implemented by firms using AI. So what are some of the emerging risks that you perceive we would be dealing with in this in capturing some of the risks with the use of AI?
This is a good point, and it was something that was debated for quite a long time. You know, what we didn't want the standard to be was a stick to beat people with. It was actually born out of a requirement for people to understand how to deal with this. So it was answering a very real question that we had in the profession. And actually, when we talk about risk, you know, all firms will have risk registers anyway. So all it's really doing is augmenting that risk register with risks that will come from the use of AI. And a lot of that's very simply about things like data privacy. So, you know, making sure you understand where your data is going and making sure you've got a system that you trust. So in other words, not just putting confidential client information into the free version of ChatGPT and not having a defensible position on that. So, you know, it's as with all risk registers, the actual value is in the mitigation strategy, not the risk. So you can identify the risk, and then the important thing is saying, well, you know, and a good example of that might be, well, in our company, we're going to implement something like Microsoft Copilot because that provides the necessary security and kind of transparency that we need to ensure that our data is not going into the public sphere. There's risks around IP ownership, like who owns the IP of any kind of AI generated material. And then there's risks around liability. So, you know, if something goes wrong and it's a car crash because someone's relied on AI, who's liable for that? And I think that was a relatively simple one in that it goes back to what I said with the book ending. As long as we use that approach, that we are still always, as chartered surveyors, always responsible for what goes out, it's actually not a big difference to what we're doing. But what we don't want people doing is thinking this is a get out of jail card, you know, so oh, I've used AI. And then the other big risk, and this is not exclusive, by the way, these are just some of the big ones I would put on a risk register, is bias. Because these AI systems, they are biased. They're inherently biased because they're based on the data that they're trained on. And that doesn't make them not useful or not incredibly powerful, but it's understanding what that bias could be. So, for example, on a risk register, if you recognize there's a bias in a certain system, you can put a mitigation strategy in to make sure that you're addressing that bias when you're outputting anything. So like I say, it's not meant to be a stick to beat people with. It's meant to be a tool, this standard, to help people. And not just big, this is really important, not just for big firms, but for small firms and medium-sized firms to understand how to navigate these very, very difficult waters. To be frank, you know, there has been a bit of pushback from some people saying, God, is this over-regulation? Is this... Because there was a lot of problems with the EU Act, for instance, saying this is going to stifle creativity. And, you know, I think we have to take those criticisms fairly, and we've got to look at it, but it's like a tightrope, isn't it? It's a tightrope between understanding members' anxiousness and anxieties around AI, and at the same time not over-regulating to the point that people become numb. And I think we got the balance right with this, to be honest. And I think things like risk registers are things people understand and they understand how to deal with. We're not really asking them to do anything other than they wouldn't do normally with a risk register for their firm. We're just augmenting it with AI risk capabilities. So I hope that answers the question. Apologies if I went off.
It does, James. Thank you very much for your insight on that. So we've looked at sustainability, we've talked into education, and now James has brought us to the art of accountability and governance. I would like us to move into the next stage. So we also need to acknowledge that responsible AI is not about who benefits from AI, it's also who might be left behind. So I think EDI always and should be the core of whatever we're discussing when it comes to ethical use of AI. So I'll move on to Kevina to bring some insight into inclusivity with AI and also the way we use it responsibly. So what the RIC standard is calling for is that there has to be diverse stakeholders to avoid bias with this AI system. So we have to get input from a diverse amount of stakeholders to contribute to the data in the AI system in the bid to take bias away from it, which we know would not be 100% anyway. But then, Kevina, the question goes to you, like, how do we ensure that AI in using surveying supports diversity, equity, and inclusion rather than reinforcing systemic inequalities that we are currently already dealing with in the industry?
Thank you. First of all, I just want to ask if you can hear me because I know we had some sound issues. Okay, perfect. Well, nice to meet you all, and thank you so much for having me. It's hard because I feel like it's all interconnected. Some of the answers that have already been provided speak into this slightly, not necessarily from an inclusion perspective, but just in terms of the biases that can be presented by the AI. It's been said that the AI is only as fair as the data that's put into it, that underpins it. And ultimately, bias or incomplete data sets can reinforce underrepresentation, basically. So I'll give an example, particularly with women. Recently, I was on a podcast for the RICS, and we spoke about research showing that women leave the quantity surveying profession on average 10 years earlier than men. And this kind of shows a broader systemic inequality, but the AI tools could unintentionally actually accentuate this if they recommend career pathways or task allocations that are based on those historical patterns rather than equitable practices. So ultimately, the patterns that have been input into the system over time will really just reinforce over and over and over based on the profiles of the people that we're dealing with if we use AI. So this would probably need a multi-layered approach. We've already spoken about the guides that have been put in place by the RICS recently. But I do think regulating bodies will have a crucial responsibility to regulate the AI adoption. I think the standards will have to ensure that the systems are all tested for bias, that they demonstrate inclusive practices. And in fact, I think they need to incentivize public bodies, businesses, and people who are, for example, looking for EFRIC status to show that they're actively embedding diversity into leadership, mentorship, AI-enabled workflows, and make sure the work and recruitment has an inclusivity benchmark, and show how their AI systems are accountable for rewriting this. I think you spoke on that, James, earlier, that we need to write in mitigation strategies to make sure that those workflows are not being interrupted. I think we also need to be looking at making sure that there's no human oversight when we are using the AI system. So again, like you said earlier, if a human is using an AI system, we need to make sure that we are trained to recognize those biases and make sure that the people who are inputting into the systems themselves are biased. From my experience being on multicultural teams across South Africa, UK, etc., I've seen how we've had to actually implement diversity improvement and problem-solving outcomes. And I'd love to see those incorporated into the AI systems to make sure that they are fairer outputs. So I hope that answers the question. I think it's a twofold approach. It's within the AI system, and then also making sure that the people who are operating the system themselves are diverse. Otherwise, there'll still be the same biases, just that are overlaid one after the other from both ends.
Now, thank you very much for that, Kevin. Now, let's think about the equitable part of the use of AI. So we currently now have a RICS AI standard, and there has some requirement for firms. For instance, the RICS register, getting data on sustainability regarding the AI system that any firm chooses. And there's many more sort of this requirement laid out in the standard that firms have to do in order to comply with the new regulation, right? Now, on the flip side is we might argue that large firm usually would have more resources to implement this governance framework compared to SMEs. right? And this might also be widening the digital divide. Like, are small firms going to be able to meet all of these new requirements by RICS in order to be AI compliant in their surveying practice? And how do we actually balance this divide between SMEs and large firms?
Yeah, I actually took a look into that, Kirak, and the digital divide it's real. Many large firms have dedicated a lot of innovation teams towards creating bespoke AI tools for their businesses, where yes, often SMEs struggle with the cost, the expertise, the change management. In fact, I looked in to a couple of statistics and I saw that only about 42% of SMEs in the built environment had adopted the AI tools as compared to 75% of the larger organizations and consultancies. So without intervention, this gap will just literally accentuate the inequality within the profession, ultimately. I think some of the practical solutions will include knowledge sharing hubs, for example, some open AI source tools that might need to be developed and shared, some professional development programs for people who don't have access to those tools. And again, I feel like a lot of responsibility will be placed on the professional bodies who these SMEs are paying into to provide some templates, case studies, some digital toolkits for smaller firms, for example, some peer-to-peer networks. And in case the point wasn't very clear earlier, I think that firms need to be incentivized with either concessions. People who are pursuing their efforts need to be incentivized to play their role in giving back and giving access to these tools, ultimately, because who are we going to hold responsible? It can't just be the professional bodies. It needs to be those with the tools that need to impact these differences that might be created between the SMEs and big companies. But yes, there also need to be some collaborations with universities, which also need to then level the playing field, because these tools need to be made available to those who are coming into the industry, and they need to be well versed on these tools too. In my experience at ACOM, I've had some mentoring initiatives that encourage early professionals to experiment with digital tools, even with limited budgets. But I think there is going to be, again, a multifaceted approach. It'll need to be from professional bodies, bigger corporations, and then also with these, I think, small sharing hubs that make sure the AI tools are accessible to everyone, making sure they're transformative across the board. But I think the onus is played on all bodies and all parts to make sure that people who aren't having access to these tools are flagging it up and not just using a ChatGPT, for example, and that the professional bodies are playing their part in making sure, I mean, they are a professional body that people are investing into, that they are showing that they are not just providing guidance, but accessibility to the correct sort of tools.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kevin. And finally, as someone who works very closely with early career surveyors, do you see AI as a way to attract and retain more diverse, newer generation into the profession? Or also, can it serve as a tool to open more doors into having fresh new insight from young professionals, or is it going to just do otherwise? I don't know.
Oh, absolutely. I think we're going to be automating some of the repetitive tasks that often the younger generation end up doing when they come into the industry. But I think this new space is going to really allow professionals to focus on more analytical, strategic, and problem-solving work. And I think that a lot of this might appeal to some of the generations, diverse generations. But these tools, again, must be deployed inclusively. And without the careful design, I still do think that the AI could act as a barrier if the performance metrics or recommendations fail to reflect the diverse career paths of the individuals who are coming to the profession. But then again, like I said, if we use the AI tools correctly, I can only imagine that it would incentivize people to join the companies. Again, if we automate certain things, but make sure they're not being, if we automate certain areas that are creating barriers for early recruitment and allow them to get a little bit more involved in the hands-on task and analytical tasks, I definitely think we could ensure some of the retention. And then I think if we pair the AI with the mentorship, with reverse mentoring, with structured development programs within our field, that too, I think that visibility would definitely create a lot more of a longing to be part of the profession. I think there's a lot of potential for creating a space within our profession that makes it a little bit more interesting, whilst that automation becomes stronger with some of the tasks that we do. And I do definitely think that if we also start recruiting a more diverse range of individuals by using the power of AI, and people start to see role models who look like themselves, who have the same sort of outwardly appearances, I mean by underrepresented by minorities and females, will definitely retain a larger array of individuals, definitely. I hope that answers the question.
It does answer my question. Thank you very much to our panelists. I'm a bit cautious of time, so I'd want us to wrap up and have a reflective question. And this goes to all of the panelists. So we've already seen perspective from sustainability, education, practice, and also equity in this case. And so I'd like to close with inviting all of our panelists to share one principle or takeaway for QS professional currently plugged in today. So what does responsible AI for responsible practice mean to you? And what is the single takeaway that you would want our audience to go away with today in terms of thinking about equity, responsible use of AI, and also anything generally on responsible AI for responsible practice? So can you think about a takeaway from your perspective that you would want the audiences to go away today and have a think about in terms of how to shape their own personal practice?
And can I just quickly say that while our panelists are just thinking about their one-liner, can I just encourage that our audience can start to populate the chat with any questions that you have, because we're going to have about a 20-minute Q&A session, and I think we should take the opportunity of having this very rich talent bank of panelists that we have to pitch our questions and get credible answers to. Thank you. So over to our panelists. Any of you, whenever you're ready, just unmute your mic and run with it.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think an excellent panel discussion. But before I jump into that one-liner, just wanted to give a few updates also further, which should address some of the questions. So I think, as James mentioned, the idea behind the RICS responsible use of AI standard is more of encouraging a structure use rather than becoming a blocker. I don't think it should be seen as a blocker. Otherwise, you have a wild, wild west and you don't know who's using what are the principles behind usage. So I think it's a very good first giant baby step, as I call it, where it would, I think, promote structure to the use of this important area within QS. It is a globally applicable standard. I think a couple of other things that RICS is doing and would address questions that were or points that were made. Starting early next year, we are launching a pilot pathway on data analytics and intelligence. Currently, we are running two other pathways, one on sustainability and one on retrofit. Starting next year, I'm a member of RICS. RICS members would be required to undertake CPD, which spans ethics, spans sustainability, and spans data and digital technologies also. We are soon launching our tech partner program, which basically would help again bring this ecosystem of tech providers closer to our members, adding value to both members as well as tech providers. Now, my one-liner really is, I think we should consider, and I'm worked for quite some time, so I could very easily bypass the use of AI and not worry about it. But I think we should all treat this as a personal professional responsibility to create an enablement framework for ourselves and for our colleagues to use AI in a proper fashion, where the term proper perhaps colloquially means responsibly. You could explain AI usage, make sure that it's not disadvantaging anyone within your team, within your professional network through your use of AI. But I think that personal enablement framework is what we all need to look at. And that enablement framework would be made possible by your organization. So at RICS, we have recently been allowed to use Microsoft 365 Copilot for our work, as long as we disclose, we do not create content that is not been vetted, checked, changed, edited, verified. So I think it's very crucial that we treat this as part of our professional responsibility. I think QS profession stands to gain the most out of the AI usage in our profession, because we are such a data-rich and measurement-driven profession.
Thank you very much, Anil. Thank you.
Do you want me to go next?
Yeah, please, James.
That was great insights from Anu. Just before I give my one liner, I just want to go back very quickly on I think it's a really important question around can this actually end up widening the gap? I would take the view, the counter narrative to that in terms of the RICS standard, is that actually, if anything, small firms are more agile and they can probably adopt a lot of these things faster. And because a lot of them maybe weren't sure where to start, so what this is trying to do is give them a framework to start. So that is definitely not the intention, to create a divide. Of course, there is a risk there, and that's something we'd have to address over the course of the next few years to see if it is creating a divide. But I would take it, if I was a small or medium-sized firm, I would look at this as an opportunity to be incredibly agile and move probably faster than some of the big corporates. So take it with all things in the world, right? It's all about attitude. You can look at it and say, this is awful, this is something that's going to put me at a disadvantage, or you can take the view, right, this is something that I can use as an opportunity. So onto my one-liner, and it's kind of going back to what I said before. I would say experiment with AI. Don't sit there reading about it, talking about it. It's great to come on things like this, but experiment with it. But take responsibility for your own AI literacy, because I don't think the risk to me isn't in using AI, it's in using it blindly. So as the experimentation along with taking responsibility for your own literacy is an incredibly powerful thing to have.
Thank you very much, James. Thanks.
I can go next.
Yeah, that's fine, Noah.
So if I was to choose one thing to suggest, it would be part of something that I teach on strategy for organizational AI implementation. I would definitely advise that for any QS business or even individuals, first of all, to create a detailed gap analysis of why they need to use AI. Without that detailed gap analysis, or that gap analysis is what will define what skill sets need to be upskilled or obtained in the business, what data needs to be shared, what solutions need to be adopted, supervised, unsupervised learning, or other AI mechanisms, what data needs to be analyzed. So all of these will not work without having a proper detailed gap analysis at the beginning to define the scope of what AI needs to be used for. And that would be the one thing that I would like to suggest here.
Thank you very much, Noah. Kevina,
yeah,
back to you.
Definitely. I was trying to press what exactly was the most important part, but I think it just goes back to the fact that if we want AI to truly serve the profession, I think it must be used responsibly. I think we're all just very busy people, and I think a lot of people can look for shortcuts, are trying to work faster, and that's not a bad thing by any means possible. But I think that we need to take accountability for the sustainability piece and the accountability around the work that we are getting out of the AI. And making sure that it's actually going to equip the next generation. Yes, to the information, but particularly where we're making sure that there is a diverse body of people who are being served, and making sure that the information that comes out of there is beneficial to all of them. ultimately to help us make better decisions for society. Because part of our work is very practical, yes, but we are a very people-oriented profession, both for our clients, with the people we serve. And I think it's a really important part to integrate and to take away when we think about the use of AI.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Thank you to our panelists today for the insightful conversation around sustainability, education, practice, and also equity. I'll now open the floor for the Q&A session. We're right on time, actually. We've got 20 minutes to go through the questions, and I have some already interesting questions in the Q&A box. I would start with Dan. So we have a question regarding, again, this is an open question, so feel free to put your contribution and hopefully we can collectively answer these. So somebody asked, how can QS professionals prevent the over-reliance on AI from eroding the critical thinking, contextual judgment, and also professional intuition? So how can we prevent AI from eroding our critical thinking, contextual judgment, and also professional intuition in the profession?
I think I really like what Noah said about creating a gap analysis on why we need to use the tool. I think we're all very quick to, especially like James said, we come with some innovative tools have been developed by our firms, and we're very quick to jump into the tool for any given practice, but we're not looking for what the inputs are, the reasons that we're using the AI, what the answers will come out probability-wise, and then taking the accountability parts. I think there's a need to look at why we're using it, and then that critical thinking will help you to start to shape the type of answer that come out of the tool as a start. And then that review process and taking accountability for it. I think once you're analyzing the data, the sources, making sure they're real, that critical thinking pathway will come back again and help you to shape what is coming out of the tool. I hope that helps and answers the question a little bit.
Yeah, it does. Does anybody have any comment on that?
May I add something to that? Sorry.
Yeah.
Go on.
Thank you. I would just like to add something to what Kavina said as well, that the problem as well is over-reliance on the what we perceive is the truthfulness or reliability of what the AI brings us. Something that we often, and that's what we all of us do, is that we have our own biases in the way that we input the data and write the prompts. And what we don't realize is that AI picks up on these preferences that we favor in the way that we ask the questions and input the data, and it gives us replies that sometimes favor these biases. So I think one of the very important things is for us to learn how to write a very objective prompt or give objective data in a way that doesn't show any particular preferences, and hence we wouldn't be reliant on almost mirroring the answer to what we prefer. Just wanted to add that one.
Thank you. Thanks. James?
I would just add on to that. I keep talking about its attitude, so it's opportunity. So I don't see using AI as a replacement for our human and our ability to communicate. At the end of the day, we still got to understand the answer and be able to kind of communicate that to a client or to whoever it is. So what I see as an opportunity to spend more of our time on value-added activities so that we can actually then do more critical thinking, more contextual judgment, rather than less. Because there's no huge value in doing some of these grunt works that we have to do. If you take quantity surveying as an example, there's no real value in the task of moving data from one spreadsheet to another. The value is in when you get to an answer, how you then communicate that and how you then help sit down with a client make a decision. I think that gives us an opportunity to do more of that, not less. So that's the slight add-on I would put there.
Yeah, thank you very much, James. I'm a bit cautious that we've got quite a lot of interesting questions, so I'll pass the question on to anyone who's willing, if you don't mind. So we have this question from Octavian. So Octavian is asking that consultants need to be more transparent and open to their client about their use of AI and potentially share any cost saving because they've spent less time doing the work. So how can relationship between client and consultant be more transparent? So this is a very interesting one. Has anyone got any takers on that? Yeah.
I think I don't know that this may be too blunt, but I think that would be a sort of a myopic view of looking at this tool. As I think very rightly James said, as you as a client, would you rather have an expert spend time, most of their time compiling data, searching for information, writing minutes, and all that stuff, or searching for better products, materials, systems, sub-assemblies for your project, looking for risks, identifying discrepancies with the aid of a tool? So therefore, I think it certainly is going to help the clients. But now it's like asking a consultant that since you use now Microsoft Word, you save time, therefore there should be reduction in the fee for some reason. But I think it's more important to consider the value add from using these tools. Consider, like, we as humans probably can't look at 1,000 historical projects, discern wisdom from that, and apply it to the current project. But with augmenting with AI tools appropriately, responsibly, with explanation, we could probably look at trends in those 1,000 projects and make more value creation for the project. So I think it's better to view that from a value lens rather than a cost lens.
Yeah, Afolabi, I think you've got your hand raised.
Now I'll cede the floor to the panelists to continue contribution. I had a question, so I'll just let James.
Okay, I'll pull you in after. Yeah, James.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
No, so I think Anil answered it adequately, so please move on from me.
Sorry, say that again?
I think Anil made my point, so I'll take my hand down.
That's fine. No problem at all. So I'm going to be jumping some questions because there's some, and I'm trying to see if we can cover every topic that we've looked at today. So this is a sustainability-based question, and I find it very interesting. So Chelsea is asking that I've recently watched a documentary about the rise of data centers in the rural and desert area in the US, which items the impact on scarce resources and also the issue of noise pollution to the nearby residents. So as we increasingly integrate AI into our profession, how do we reconcile its growing infrastructure demand with our commitment to sustainability? Is it truly possible to adopt AI responsibly without compromising environmental goals? I think that's a very interesting one. So is anyone?
It is. Yes. So maybe if you don't mind, I can start and then others can chip in.
Yeah.
Living in the US, I'm quite familiar with that debate. I think any project inappropriately placed in a community is going to have an impact on the social, environmental, and economic dimensions when we talk about sustainability. But that's very prominent when it comes to data centers. In fact, I live outside of the Washington, D.C. area in a state called Maryland. On the other side of the Potomac River is Virginia, where they have lots of data centers. And some of these data centers are pretty close to some of the suburban communities, and it's a pretty significant challenge. But I think that's where our role for experts like James can pitch in, not only by looking at the routine work that goes behind creating assets, buildings, infrastructure, but also by looking at these dimensions in a connected way. So we, James, myself, and a couple of colleagues, we've written on this issue, which is, we call it the wicked problems. These are not easy problems or easy challenges to address, but data centers designed from the very beginning, AI needs to become a core part of the workflow and work practices where these dimensions, these outcomes of social, environmental, and economic outcomes should be seen in a cohesive fashion. It's a very difficult thing for us to do without the aid of tools like BIM, CDE, and now perhaps AI. So I think our role becomes even more prominent when it comes to measuring, making design decisions. In fact, if you look at the report that I just shared with you, our 2025 RICS AI in construction report, we asked, where do you see AI being used in the next 5 years? About 2,200 professionals have responded. 46% of the respondents say it's going to be in design optioneering, which means during the early stages of a project, looking at cost and carbon, looking at where this asset is placed, looking at noise, looking at perhaps other aspects, including solar, are very crucial. One last point I want to make, especially on sustainability and energy related issues, there's a lot of activity going on right now on small nuclear reactor energy provision to these data centers. I think it's still early, but there's a lot of regulation surrounding that. And that may help in bringing some clean energy to these high demanding data centers.
Thank you, Annie. That's very interesting to know. Noha, can I have you come in?
Well, I want to add to what Anil just said. He mentioned the last point was something I just want to continue on, that there are data centers right now which are using different mechanisms to reduce their energy consumption, like using renewable energy sources, repurposing the heat that is coming out of the data center, reusing it again, using, for example, liquid cooling instead of air cooling. Also, when it comes to designing the AI models themselves, there are some attempts at designing smaller, more efficient data models. Some users are also resorting to using edge equipment in local places instead of always relying on the data center itself. So there are activities that are currently starting to be adopted now in order to reduce the energy consumption. And hopefully these will increase as we go along.
Yeah, thank you very much. James, I'll have you come in quick. I'm a bit cautious of
Just
time
really
now.
quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, just to add on to that, I call it the chicken and egg situation, because actually we need to invest more in this technology with a great hope that actually the extra compute power, the extra resource will create more and more powerful models that will then start solving some of these problems that Noah's spoken about. So it is a bit of a bet, but my bet would be that we actually end up solving a lot of these problems along the way through the use of artificial intelligence. So it is very chicken and egg.
Yeah, thank you very much, James. That's really screening. Yeah, so I have another question for Kazemi Adi. So it goes, in the absence of a global ethical standard for AI, should the surveying profession establish a formal benchmark or competency framework to verify the skill level of AI users? So should we should the profession actually develop a formal benchmark or competency framework whereby AI users can gauge their competency or skill level?
I
Yeah.
definitely think so.
I-
'Cause I think that, oh, sorry, you want to go ahead, James?
You go first.
You
No,
go.
that's okay.
Okay, perfect. Because I just think when I speak about diversity and inclusion, I'm not just speaking about minorities and ethnic minorities. We also have age gaps. We have levels of skill gaps. We have people out of university. We have people who are hopefully starting to come from professional backgrounds where they haven't had formal education and are still going to find a path into being chartered, for example. And I think that there will be different people using the AI system. So if we're going to guarantee that the outputs are actually verified, so to speak, we need to make sure the users are understanding the inputs and the outputs of the AI and the best way to put in the correct prompts. I think we spoke about prompts earlier on, because basically what you put in is what you get out. So I think that would be a really, really good one to put into to help regulate further in terms of information coming and used from AI.
Yeah, thank you. Just a follow-up on that. So I have this interesting question about, do you see in the future AI becoming a competency in the MRICS pathway?
As I just mentioned, I guess that's for me.
Yeah, Anil, yeah, because
yes. So as I said, RICS, we are working on developing a new pathway, which is the data analytics and intelligence pathway. So it could possibly answer some of the questions relating to a skills framework, because our competency framework largely helps even, I would say, assess universities driving their curriculum. So this new pathway, which will probably go into pilot stage, because launching a new pathway has several steps, approvals, member input, and so on. So that's likely going to start after we start. So there are three pathways, new pathways to MRICS, one pathway actually to SOC RICS, and two pathways to MRICS. The retrofit pathway is a new pathway to become an associate RICS member. The data analysis and intelligence and sustainability are MRICS pathways. The first two, retrofit and sustainability, will start pilot in January 2026 based on internal and governance approvals. And then right after that, perhaps a quarter later, we'll have the new data analytics and intelligence pathway, which would have some of these things addressed, perhaps maybe in the Q2 2026, again, based on approvals.
Yeah, thank you. James, I know you have your hand raised, but I'd rather direct another question to you, which is quite similar to the one Anil just answered. So Dingayo has asked, will AI create imbalanced competitive advantage across QS firm? For example, some employer information requirements may require consultants or contractors to disclose their AI capabilities. So if that becomes the case, so let me read that again.
Okay.
So will AI create an imbalanced competitive advantage across QS firms, especially if employer information requirement from the client is asking contractors or consultants to disclose their AI capabilities? So which means in future, is it possible that firms with higher AI capabilities would, stand a better chance than firms with limited ones?
Okay, it's a really good question. I think kind of the intention of what the RICS is doing, particularly with the standard, is to avoid that happening, or at least intentionally, because we're giving everyone the framework around what they should and shouldn't do. Now, then the responsibility is on the firms or the members to implement that in a strategic way. And as the market will always dictate. So, so if there's a firm of surveyors who implement AI effectively in accordance with the regulations, then they are naturally going to be at an advantage compared to a firm who doesn't. So it's not the intention to make it imbalanced, but I think it's very fair to firms to be able to, basically everyone can get to the same point. No one's at a disadvantage, but those who do implement it and look at it strategically could give themselves a competitive market advantage.
Thank you very much, James. I'm going to ask one final question, and this is combining two questions that are quite similar together. So I have one question regarding, so I came across a few AI tools days ago which called measured AI and could do taking off automatically BOQ, material and labor schedule and the likes. So when using this tool, how can you check the accuracy to be sure that it is free from error? And then there's another question asking about how do you test or how do you verify that the data that the AI is trained on is actually accurate and would avoid any errors or any biases in your output from the system? So I think they're quite similar. So how do you check that these tools that you're using are actually trained with good quality data on data free from any sort of biases and the like?
If I can just respond to just the takeoffs only in practice, I think you'd have to go back to the basic principles, and that goes back to analysis, or the cognitive analysis of the professionals that are using the AI tools. So the same way you'd balance off your measures when you have measured them yourself, there are some checks that you need to do. Same with when you're using BIM in practice to get your measures done more quickly. You definitely need to be checking them the same way you do with manual measures for the time being, at least. But the anomalies will always be the responsibility of the person who's measuring. And I think that goes back to the over-reliance on the AI tools to complete the exercise of work. I think we'll always need to be checking here and there to make sure the consistencies are correct, at least when it comes to takeoffs.
Right, thank you. Noah, yeah.
Simply, one needs to ask about sources of where the data comes from, and one needs to sporadically at least validate some of these, go into them and check whether they actually say what is being given by the AI. That is one very simple tool to do that.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So I'll pass us on to Abdullah to do the closing remark. We're now 14:28. We have 2 minutes to go, and I wouldn't want to take much of our time this afternoon. But we have some other interesting questions in the Q&A box. I'll gather them and get responses from our panelists and hopefully send that across to the registered participants so you can have answers to your question if that's okay. So thank you very much, everyone. I'll pass you on to Abdullah now.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kudirat. Thanks to our panelists. But before that, I think Falabi is going to come in for the opening remark. But before that, what's next on the project? So what we are doing next is you can watch out for our next webinar. And also, as I mentioned earlier, on our current ongoing project funded by Innovate UK, we are developing AI competency. So what we are doing is we're working with Bridge AI. We are trying to contextualize AI competency for construction professionals. So what we want to be able to do is we can say, okay, a certain professional has AI competency to a certain level. So we don't want construction professionals to become software developer, programmers, or what have you, but they should be able to use AI responsibly and ethically, as I mentioned earlier. So you can watch out for that ongoing project. Also, we are releasing our AI for QS reports, and also we are calling out to companies to share use cases of AI in companies, what they've used AI to do in their companies with some under a certain framework. Also, we are developing curriculum in academia. We are trying to pilot some curriculum within module and as a separate module on its own. We are coming up with some topics that we can actually include to some modules that we have existing, and also we have some standalone modules that we are trying to pilot to see the impact of for students to be able to develop themselves and get the necessary AI skills. So I will pass over to Afolabi to round it up.
Okay, thank you very much for the exciting conversations that we've had. If I'm just going to give if you permit me to just give a very brief summary of some of the key messages we've received from our panelists. So Anil did tell us about the fact that, there might soon be some requirements for the disclosure of energy impacts, particularly of data centers. Dr. Noha did mention about scrutiny being key, being able to scrutinize the data that comes out of AI and not just accepting whatever you get. James did mention something that I found quite interesting, and he said something about the person at the end. And I think this is a reminder that we need to look at AI as a tool and not somebody replacing the person who is carrying out the task. Remember, as QSs, as professionals, we have responsibilities to our clients, and so the tool is an enabler. And I found that, humans as bookends and remembering the person at the end, I found that as powerful concepts. And Kevin did tell us about the fact that, and it's something I have probably never thought about, that the stats about diversity and having females leaving the profession, perhaps I think you said 10 years earlier than males, and the possibility of AI being a leveler, so to speak. So I trust that we've all had an exciting time listening to our panelists. I want to say a very big thank you. Can we, through electronic means, celebrate our panelists? And can I also request that Abdullah, do we have a second another page that just shows the contact for the AI for QS project in case anybody wants to get in touch with us? So please get in touch. This is an ongoing conversation, and just be on the lookout. Follow us on our LinkedIn page. I'm also on Twitter. There's going to be a digital hub that will be a repository of information as this project progresses. And thank you very much for giving us an hour and a half and 3 extra minutes of your time this afternoon. Thank you very much, and see you at the next event.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you very much,
for having me.
everybody.